Even the most stubborn, most monstrous beings in existence can have a change of heart. If not, they can at least get a lot cooler. Lex Luthor. Superman's arch nemesis has been a big deal for nearly a century, remaining at the top of his league as one of the most recognizable villains in all of DC, and that's thanks to his hidden superpower, the ability to keep up with the times. When Lex first started out in the villain league, he was far different from the Luthor we've all come to know and love. In fact, he went by Alexi Luthor and even started out with red hair. Funny enough, Lex's baldness can be attributed to an art mistake where the penciler confused Lex with the bald and bulkier Ultra Humanite, giving us the look that Lex would rock for the rest of his existence. Now as time went on, he transformed from just a mad scientist into this evil businessman type. He still had this evil genius side to him, but now he had a big corporation doing his dirty work, which made him a more complex villain, adding depth by showing a different kind of intelligence and ambition. Now post-Crisis, the modern Lex is a mix of all these versions. He's an evil genius with the resources of a huge corporation, giving him a blend of sophistication and power. Next up is Magneto. For a character that started off as basically a knockoff to Doctor Doom, Magneto has certainly come a long way from being perceived as just a mere villain. Of course, at first glance he might seem like a bad guy bent on destroying humans, but his journey is deeper than that. His haunting origin story led him to believe that mutants should rule, given how humans treated mutants so poorly. As time rolled on, Magneto's story got twisty. Sometimes he teamed up with the good guys, showing a different side. He even began understanding the importance of working together with humans, at least on occasion. His character evolved, showcasing moments of empathy and understanding. I mean, sure, he still does clash with the X-Men, but his motivations and actions have changed. He's a prime example of a villain who's undergone a roller coaster journey, blurring the lines between good and bad. If you're enjoying the video so far, please support the channel by pressing like, subscribing to Top 10 Nerd, and ringing that notification bell. Jason Todd. When this iteration of Robin first popped up in Batman comics, he was just a redhead acrobat sidekick, which is a far cry from the anti-hero we know today. His origin story changed over time from being a determined kid wanting to be Batman's sidekick to having a more darker, tragic past after Crisis on Infinite Earths. Now this guy wasn't just another Robin. He was more intense and pretty rough with bad guys, sometimes even crossing Batman's line. Now sadly, his impulsive nature led to his tragic end in A Death in the Family, where Joker beat him with a crowbar. This hit Batman hard, and Jason's death became a warning for future Robins about the dangers of their job. But after this, he miraculously came back to life and took up the mantle of the Red Hood. As the Red Hood, he went down a dark path, disagreeing with Batman's crime-fighting methods and becoming way more ruthless with criminals. Now over time, he's changed, becoming a better team player, leading his own squads, and even patching things up with Bruce Wayne. He's mellowed out a bit from his etchier days as the Red Hood, and is working to be a hero in his own way, even earning Batman's trust back. Next up is Sandman. William Baker, better known by his alias as Flint Marko, has most definitely come a long way. Starting out as just another super-powered thief, slowly but surely his character became fleshed out with a tragic backstory with a motive to justify his actions that would even make a grown man cry, or at least a young AJ. Baker has even been able to reform over the years, growing into a formidable anti-hero, which is a far cry from his initial appearance as a two-dimensional robber that got beaten by Spidey with a vacuum cleaner. Now, before all that, in his childhood, his dad wasn't around, his mom struggled with substance abuse, and bullies made his life miserable. When he finally stood up for himself, he got a taste for power, and that's when things took a turn. Flint started being a bully himself, letting others do his work because school wasn't his thing, but his path got even rockier when he messed with football games for money and then got kicked out of school. Then came his stint in prison, but that didn't hold him for long. After he escaped, he ended up in a nuclear test and survived, gaining these insane sand powers. Instead of turning his life around though, he chose the wrong path again, becoming the Sandman, using his powers for crime. Boy was he good at it, even being a founding member of the Sinister Six and the Fantastic Four. Now Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 3, a film which most people would rather forget happened, revealed that all his villainy had been an attempt to save his terminally ill daughter, adding a touch of humanity to justify his actions and proving that deep down he's not such a bad guy. In fact, he would go on to fight alongside heroes in the Outlaws and the Wild Pack, and even as a reserve Avenger. While he continues to work against the law, there's still that spark of good which comes out every now and then. Catwoman. Ever since her debut in Batman comics, she's undergone some major transformations, making her one of the most dynamically changing villains. Initially seen as a Gotham baddie, she's now more of an anti-hero. She's been part of different groups like the Justice League and the Outsiders, proving that she's not all bad, especially after her and Batman's rocky engagement. Her backstory's been all over the place too. Before a big DC event, she had memory loss from a plane crash, but then another story, she was a dominatrix turned burglar, which is definitely crazy. Now, one huge change came in 2015 when she smooched another Catwoman, which was a huge deal for the LGBTQ+ community and representation in comics. Now, sometimes in her backstory she knows her parents, other times she grows up in an orphanage. Her sister's in and out of the picture depending on which story you read. And her moral code is definitely all over the place. Sometimes she's not into eliminating people at all, but other times, when her loved ones are in danger, she is quick to throw down. Black Adam. He started off as a baddie due to his family mess. He claimed that he was innocent in some serious stuff involving Captain Marvel's folks, and it turned out that he wasn't the guilty party. But even with his newfound good guy claim, he ended up causing trouble with the Justice Society, teaming up with the bad guys at first, the Injustice League. Later on, after some brain surgery to remove a tumor, he switched sides again, helping the good guys beat the bad ones. He even helped the Justice Society in a huge fight against this demon dude. Now, they were weary about letting him join the team because of his super shady past, but eventually they gave him a chance. The thing is, he couldn't shake his old ways entirely. He and some pals went a bit too extreme, deciding to take justice into their own hands by offing a terrorist, which caused a huge fight in the Justice Society again. Even though he had moments of being a hero, his past just kept on haunting him. He had ups and downs, sometimes doing good, sometimes causing chaos, but lately he's been leaning more towards the hero stuff, teaming up with big leagues like the Justice League. But the big question hanging over him is whether he'll stay on the hero path or slip back into his dark side. Thanos, the big baddie from the Marvel Universe, didn't always look the same or act the same in comics or in movies. When he first popped up in the 70s, he was this skinny, less wrinkly purple guy, but as time passed, artists beefed him up to resemble the much bulkier villain we recognize today. This dude didn't just change physically though. He started out as a shady character, working behind the scenes and using gadgets for power, but later he upgraded to this super powerful being wielding insane cosmic abilities, culminating in the infamous Snap. But he didn't always stay a full-time bad guy. Sometimes he teamed up with the good guys, which was pretty weird. And in a comic series called Infinity, he even got his own squad of followers, making him way more organized in his evil deeds. They did lots of changes for the movies too. In Infinity War, Thanos wasn't just this evil guy for the sake of it. He had the idea to make the universe better by destroying half of anything, which was pretty crazy. Dr. Doom, usually the thorn in the side of Fantastic Four, but once in a blue moon, he pulls off a move that makes you think twice about his villainous ways. In this wild Marvel showdown called Secret Wars in 2015, Doom did the unthinkable, admitting that Reed Richards, Mr. Fantastic himself, could have done a better job with all the power Doom had, which is super shocking considering it's coming from Dr. Doom. Even more mind-blowing, Doom gave up his crazy cosmic powers to Reed, and in return, Reed fixed Doom's messed up face. Now, after this whole power swap, Doom went all in to be a good guy. Yeah, that's right. When Tony was out of action because of Captain Marvel, Doom took on the Iron Man gig. And guess what? He was not pretending. He genuinely wanted to be a hero, which is just insane to think about. But even for a hot minute, he had even teamed up with the Human Torch and the Thing, fighting the good fight. Major Disaster. Once a not so popular green baddie, Major Disaster surprised everyone by flipping the script and joining the Justice League of America. Back in the day, he was like this forgotten action figure buried deep in the toy chest, a Z-list villain that nobody really cared about. But then, he became a Justice League member during the Joe Kelly and Doug Mankey's JLA run, and the shockwaves were astronomical. A villain teaming up with the heroes was major eyebrow-raising material. At first, the League gave him the side eye as expected, trust issues, you know, but slowly but surely they warmed up to him. This was Major Disaster's shining moment in the big leagues. Fans cheered for his unexpected turnaround. But then, eventually, after the story arc, he panicked. He just vanished. Fans were pretty bummed because they wanted more, but he's been missing in action ever since. Mr. Freeze, initially known as Dr. Victor Fries or Mr. Zero, started off as a typical icy antagonist in the world of comic books. But let me tell you, his story took a wild turn in 1992 with that Batman the Animated Series episode called Heart of Ice. You see, before that, it was just your run-of-the-mill baddie chilling out in the background of Batman's world, but then something magical happened. The animated series reimagined Mr. Freeze, giving him depth that we'd never seen before. And his voice, oh man, he had this deep, haunting voice that made you just feel his pain. Suddenly, Freeze wasn't just freezing Gotham, he was a guy wrecked by sadness and revenge. The core of this story revolved around his wife Nora. Freeze was desperately trying to save her from a terminal illness, but big corporate greed and a tragic lab accident with cryogenic stuff turn him into a guy who can't survive outside of an ice suit. But then things got icy in a bad way. Remember Arnold Schwarzenegger as Mr. Freeze in that Batman and Robin movie? Yeah, the one with all the cold puns like chill out and ice to meet you. It was a goofy take that turned Freeze into a walking joke, and unfortunately that's what many folks still remember him as to this day. In the comics, Freeze stayed close to the serious version from the animated series until the New 52 reboot shook things around. Scott Snyder took Freeze in a different direction, making him way less sympathetic by altering his backstory. Suddenly Nora wasn't his wife anymore, just some girl with a made-up illness, and the guy who pulled the plug on his research, surprise surprise, it was none other than Bruce Wayne himself, which was a twist that made everyone involved a lot less likable. So while some chop him up as just a dude with the freeze ray, he's actually way cooler than that, pun intended.
Number 10. Mr. Sinister. From an obsession with capes to an army of Sinister clones to Miss Sinister to just his days as semi-mad scientist Nathaniel Essex, Mr. Sinister has changed quite a bit. Even just through his origins, we learned how much the character went through to become the villain he is today. Sinister took his name from the condemning description his wife gave him on her deathbed. She refused to forgive Nathaniel for his evil ways, calling him Sinister, a name which would stay with him and help him usher in a new role. He also has changed from just a human who is altered by Apocalypse's celestial tech to now being considered a full-fledged mutant in his current form. Number 9. Lucas Bishop. Bishop has gone from being a good guy to a bad guy a few times throughout the year, though most of the times I'd say when he is a bad guy, he's misunderstood. But it isn't just his alignment where we've seen change here and there throughout the years. He has also undergone some changes to his power set, being able to use his energy manipulation and absorption powers for more, becoming stronger, and he's had a few physical changes too. His bionic arm quickly became a classic part of his look, but he didn't always have it in the comics. He originally had 2 organic arms, but had one ripped off by Predator during the events of the Messiah complex, and had to have it replaced with a cybernetic prosthetic. Does he still have that prosthetic? We don't really know. It hasn't really come up yet in Dawn of X. He's always wearing gloves, so I can't tell. Number 8. Luke Cage. When Luke Cage was originally introduced, we knew him as Luke Cage, Hero for Hire. That very first, very stylized look that he had would later evolve into Power Man, and then eventually Luke Cage would just become Luke Cage again. Although Luke Cage wasn't even really his original name. His original name was Carl Lucas. Luke Cage was actually a criminal once upon a time, and it was during his imprisonment in Seagate Prison that he was exposed to experimental testing, which granted him his powers. Turning away from a life of crime for profit, he instead decided to use his powers to become a hero for profit. Since then, he has often been a full-fledged hero for heroic sake, and has even led his own Avengers team, the Mighty Avengers. Number 7. Monica Rambeau. Monica has been through so many different costumes and identities since she was first introduced. While we did talk about Carol's change from Miss Marvel to Captain Marvel, before Monica was Photon or Spectrum, she was Captain Marvel. In fact, she was Captain Marvel not only before Carol Danvers, but before Genis Vell, Mar-Vell's son, was even Captain Marvel. In fact, Monica only gave up the mantle of Captain Marvel, who she was originally introduced as in the comics, because of Genis Vell wanting to take over that mantle. In fact, that isn't the only mantle that Genis Vell took up that originally belonged to Monica. He now goes by the name Photon, which belonged to Monica in the 90s, before he took up that name in the early 2000s anyways. Monica has had to change names and superhero identities quite a few times it seems, because no one ever wanted to let her keep a name. In fact, she's actually only ever been known as Spectrum, her current superhero alias, since 2013. So I guess we'll wait and see if this sticks. Number 6. Iron Man. Before Tony Stark appeared, played by Robert Downey Jr. in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, he was kind of a sidelined character. Iron Man wasn't many people's favorite Avenger, nor did he have as much of the spotlight as he would get after the success of the Iron Man and Avengers films. But even ignoring the massive change to his popularity throughout the years in the comics, whether or not you were a huge Tony Stark fan before or after the MCU became a thing, he also went through a lot of character changes in the comics as well. He's recovered from alcoholism, had tons of character redesigns when it comes to his armor, has basically become part tech at this point through experimenting and modding himself. He's turned evil more than once and has died as well more than once, even at one point being killed and replaced by a younger version of himself. Whew! Talk about growth. Number 5. Superman. DC is known for their consistent characters. It's what so many of us love about that publisher. Their characters are iconic and classic because they're so consistent when it comes to what they represent and stand for. As such, what Superman believes in and stands for hasn't drastically changed over the years, but the character has undergone some major changes since the initial version of his character was first introduced in Action Comics. His powers have been a lot more pared down. Originally, Superman's power set would change dramatically depending on what kind of powers the situation called for. He was basically a wizard. Oh, and speaking of being a wizard, he's also now gained a weakness to magic to keep his insane power levels in check as well, since he was created. He was also kinda not so nice originally in the comics, with him going to all kinds of lengths to manipulate people regardless of how it made them feel. To put it bluntly, well, he was kind of a jerk. Superman now is much more considerate and kind than he was originally. In fact, that's what we associate him more with, not with him, being a jerk. He also has gotten married to Lois Lane, and the two started a family together and had a son, John Kent. Number 4. Batman. Another DC staple who is known for being relatively constant. Batman has actually changed a lot since he was first introduced. Of course, now the original Batman isn't even really the same Batman, nor is Superman really the same Superman. What we mean is the Batman you were first introduced to in the pages of Detective Comics was later retconned to be an alternate Batman, despite technically being, the first one. That Batman is now associated with the alternate world of Earth 2. That is where the character started, even if he was retconned to be an alternate. So many changes have happened to his character from then to now. Let's not forget that while Batman has a very strict moral code now, back then he was a man who was willing to kill and even use guns. He used to be a playboy, but has more recently had a more stable and ongoing relationship with main squeeze / on and off again partner Selina Kyle. He became a father to Damian, and he's had so many Robins since his first sidekick, Dick Grayson, appeared on the scene. So many Robins. Too many maybe. Number 3. Beast. Hank McCoy has gone through a lot of changes since he was first introduced, especially in terms of his character design. When people think of the codename Beast now, they likely can't picture anything but the big, bouncing blue beast that we have today. Originally, however, Beast was not known by this name because he was a big, blue, furry guy, but because of his giant stature, his giant hands, his giant feet. Hank was also brilliant, but he was also very adept athletically as well, and actually that was his mutation. He was just an abnormally strong, agile, big dude. However, after being exposed to a serum he'd created meant to suppress the mutant gene, Hank found his own mutant gene accelerated. The serum was also made using Mystique's genetic material, so that could be where the blue came from, if we're talking about logically, except that when he originally transformed, he had gray fur for a while, before it ended up to continue to mutate and actually became black. Blue only ever really came into it in terms of comic book history because artists and readers became confused due to the blue being used as a common highlight color for black at the time. And as the years have gone on, Beast has also become more and more cat-like in appearance with every passing year. So that's a weird change that I don't really know why that happened, I guess artist style. Number 2. Superboy Prime. Superboy Prime originally was a good guy, but oddly enough it was his confidence in the consistency of this fact that turned him crazy and evil, believing however that he is still the hero of the story, because where he comes from, he really is. In his reality, Earth Prime, not to be confused with the continuity of Prime Earth, superheroes only exist in comics, save for Superboy Prime, who is the only one. After his Earth was destroyed, he plotted to find a way to fix the continuity with Alexander Luthor of Earth 3, becoming a villain. When forced to face with the fact that he was no longer the hero of the story and had become a villain, he suffered a psychotic break, which also made him insane, and really more evil. Number 1. Bucky Barnes. Bucky hasn't just changed in terms of his design, but he has also gone on to pretty much become an entirely different character since his early days. Originally, Bucky Barnes was the most happy-go-lucky sidekick of Captain America, Steve Rogers. That is until Bucky was suspected dead after going MIA on a mission. Steve would mourn Bucky, and Barnes' death would become known as one of the few comic book deaths to remain constant, being considered permadead for over 40 years. He was one of those characters who would just never come back, at least so we thought, until until he did come back, with a robotic arm and a new role as a brainwashed military assassin working for Russia known as the Winter Soldier. Bucky would eventually become good again, but his time as the Winter Soldier would change him forever.
Number 10, Kitty Pryde. But now she'd rather you call her Kate. We've seen a huge transformation for Kitty Pryde over the years. Her power levels have grown exponentially, with her now not needing to even hold her breath while using her powers. Her exposure to the ancient artifact known as the Black Vortex exponentially boosted her powers, allowing her to phase the entire planet of Spartax through its snug amber casing. She has since changed even more, becoming the fearsome Captain Kate in the new Dawn of X run. Kate becomes the captain of the ship known as the Marauder and recruits her own crew of mutant friends, a new team she calls the Marauders. That's right, she's taking that name back for the heroes this time around. No more bad guy Marauders. Her new look and role as the Red Queen has definitely been a massive change for Kate, but one that I think many of us have loved. Number 9, Gwen Stacy. Gwen Stacy was one of Peter Parker's first ever girlfriends and definitely remains his first love. Even with his long-standing relationship with Mary Jane, he'll never forget Gwen. But Gwen died a long time ago in comic book history, and she hasn't really ever officially come back to stay. So, how can she have changed if she's, kind of permanently dead? Well, what has really changed when it comes to Gwen is her overall character. Now, when you are talking about Gwen Stacy, the first comic book version of her that comes to mind, usually for most people, is Spider-Gwen of Earth 65 these days. This version of Gwen is a little bit more edgy and rebellious. Instead of Peter Parker becoming Spider-Man on Earth 65, it was Gwen who took up the mantle as Spider-Woman. She's a very different and honestly more interesting and successful version of the Earth 616 Gwen. And it's crazy to think that comic book fans usually think of Spider-Gwen before thinking of the original whenever her name is brought up. Just because Spider-Gwen's a little cooler, let's be honest. Number 8, Captain Marvel / Carol Danvers. No, we're not talking about the gender bending of this superhero persona from the Kree Marvel to becoming the now part Kree / human Carol Danvers. We are talking about just Carol Danvers' growth as a character here. Originally, Carol was a security guard who ended up getting powers while being saved by the original Captain Marvel as the Psyche Magnetron exploded. This machine was sort of like a wish granting machine, and during the explosion, Carol's exposure allowed her wish to be granted. She got superpowers similar to Marvel's. She would go on to become Miss Marvel, lose her memory a few times, and eventually become the strong and very independent woman that she is today. A member of the Avengers who has since taken on the Captain Marvel mantle for herself, once her former lover / friend / role model, Marvel, passed away. We've seen Carol change not just in her superhero mantle and character design, but we've also seen her personality change and grow over time. And we've witnessed her become even stronger and even more sure of herself as time has progressed. Most of that probably has to do with her, not losing her memory as often anymore. Number 7, Poison Ivy. Ivy has always had a sort of pin-up look to her. She's gone from being an eco-terrorist and supervillain to a borderline hero, or at the very least, a neutral kind of figure. She's worked with the Birds of Prey and was even granted access to the superhero mental facility known as Sanctuary. Her design originally involved a leafy bodice before becoming more full coverage, with her wearing a black full bodysuit covered in foliage, likely to grant her more control over her poisonous touch. However, since her death and resurrection, her look has been radically changed once more, with her now having a sort of a green sinewy look, making her appear as though she is literally made out of plant life, which kind of would make sense considering this version of Poison Ivy was born from a rose, a piece of herself that she'd given to Harley. Number 6, She-Hulk. Speaking of people that are green, Jennifer Walters had to wrestle with a lot since she was first introduced. She has had to deal with her permanent connection to Bruce Banner and has had to work to earn a sense of separation from his character as the Hulk. She went from being a sexy, playful pinup hero to a full-on rage-filled, muscle-bound machine in terms of her appearance, and inside, Jen has had to deal with acknowledging her addiction to her Hulk form, as well as working to heal from that addiction. Everything she has been through has changed, not just her on the inside, but these changes have also creeped into her character design as well. Most of the changes to She-Hulk's behavior and appearance came from her powers getting a big boost, and the change has been so great that even Jen herself was forced to acknowledge it, as the two versions of herself ended up facing off in a mental courtroom. She had to reconcile with that stuff. She was like, which Hulk do I want to be? And they were like, I'm better. They're both pretty good, I think. Number 5, Dazzler. Alison Blair has had so many different looks over the years that have been so drastic, it's hard to keep track because there are likely some comics, depending on which Dazzler you are most familiar with, where you wouldn't even recognize her. A lot of her changes have come about because when she was created, she was somewhat kind of trapped in a time capsule. She had a very disco era look to her because she originally came out in 1979, just as disco was kind of getting ready to fade into the background. This was also because originally her character was created in partnership with Casablanca and its founder Neil Bogart. However, eventually Casablanca pulled away from the project, leaving Dazzler as Marvel's sole property. As times and trends have changed, so did Dazzler's look. She got a redesigned costume from Professor X during her time with the X-Men that was more superhero looking and a little less disco. She's had almost every hair color under the sun, red, pink, and black, as well as her iconic long blonde hair look, but she's also worn her hair short and even shorter many times. Like most female musical artists, it seems that Alison also feels the need to reinvent herself often. Number 4, Dr. Octopus. Doc Ock went from a straight-up villain who once plotted to steal Aunt May's recent inheritance by marrying her and becoming Peter's new uncle, kind of a weird plan, to body swapping with Peter and becoming the new Spider-Man. Not how he wanted that plan originally to go. Of course, originally he simply aimed to just steal Peter's body, as his was failing him. But Peter ended up flooding Otto's mind with his memories and convincing him to turn heroic. Otto did end up being convinced and agreed to take on the mantle of Spider-Man, becoming Superior Spider-Man. And he stayed as Superior Spider-Man for quite some time, before eventually feeling that he had kind of ultimately failed and relinquishing the body back to Peter's consciousness. He has since reappeared with his more classic appearance and role, with no memory of his time as Superior Spider-Man, how convenient, but still, for the original Dr. Octopus, his time as Superior Spider-Man remains part of his history, and was definitely a huge change for the character, and one that went on for a while. Number 3, Venom. Eddie Brock has basically done a full 180. When he was first introduced, he was a Spider-Man villain who would stop at nothing to defeat Peter Parker, whom Eddie blamed for all of his misfortune. He ended up joining forces with a symbiotic being that Spider-Man himself had rejected, and their relationship together as Venom was solidified through their joint hatred of the wall-crawling vigilante. However, over the years, Eddie's focus would shift. Where this likely all started from was the tiny bit of consciousness we saw early on as Brock wrestled with his Venom persona when it came to not harming any civilians or innocents on his revenge mission. This goodness in him would grow over time, and now Venom is no longer really a villain, but is more of an anti-hero, and even often an ally to Peter Parker's Spider-Man, albeit usually a begrudging ally. Number 2, Iceman. Remember when Bobby was first introduced and he was basically a snowman? When it comes to Iceman, one of the greatest changes we've seen from him is just how much his power levels have grown. There was a time when Emma Frost, while body swapping with him, was actually better at using his powers than even he was, inspiring Bobby to learn from Emma and work hard to learn in general how to better control and use his powers. His control has improved so much so that many consider him to be Alpha or even Omega level. The depiction of Bobby's sexual orientation has also changed. Originally, he was presented as being straight until 2015 in the comics, when Bobby realized he was gay, and in later years went on to fully accept this and even come out. While he's dated a lot of women over the years, he's currently in a relationship with Emma's brother, fellow mutant, and current White Bishop, Christian Frost. And I kind of love them together, I'm not gonna lie. Number 1, Harley Quinn. Harleen Quinzel has seen some pretty radical changes to her role in the comics and her character design. She was once the Joker's girlfriend and partner in crime, but after years of suffering and being mistreated by him and years of living in his shadow, Harley finally decided to break things off with the Joker. She went out on her own, even when he tried to track her down during her time with the Suicide Squad and convince her to return to him. The Joker told Harley that she would be nothing without him, and that he'd practically made her. He terrorized her, turned her hyenas, Bud and Lou Rabbit, and sicked them on her, forcing her to kill them. This did not inspire Harley to return to the Joker's side though, but instead strengthened her resolve. And it turns out he was wrong about Harley, as she has done pretty well for herself on her own, having all kinds of wacky fun adventures adventures and becoming a more neutral character than a straight-up villain.
Kicking off the list at number 10, we have Man-Thing. Dr. Ted Sallis made his first appearance in Savage Tales issue 1. He was a biochemistry professor who'd worked at Empire State University, and he was originally recruited by the US Army to help with Project Sulfur. The goal was to help find a solution so soldiers could survive biochemical warfare. So Sallis helped develop something called Serum SO2, and it gave immunity to all toxic biochemicals. Only the thing was, it turned these users into these, well, man-things. AIM eventually caught wind of this and wanted their sticky fingers in the mix, so after walking into an AIM ambush, Ted made a break for it to go to Dr. Kurt Connor's lab. But while on the move, he injected the last bit of serum into himself, burned the evidence, and then crashed his car into a swamp. Now, a swamp that has magical energy mixed with this one-of-a-kind super serum, now we get this guy. We get this Man-Thing, and he's awesome. As far as super soldiers go, he's maybe the most unique. He can ooze himself through fences. I mean, come on. He can control plant life and can fly on his own. I mean, you could try punching Man-Thing, but your fist would probably go through him. Yuck. And before we continue on with this list of super soldiers, guys, if you want to go ahead and give this video a like, that would be awesome. It's super helpful for our page. You guys are the best. Thanks so much for watching. Now let's get right back into this list. No wasted time. Number 9, Mockingbird. Barbara Morse. She made her comic book debut back in Astonishing Tales issue 12. She studied at Georgia Institute of Technology, specializing as well in biology. She worked with Dr. William Calvin on Project Gladiator. Now, the project was set up to recreate the super soldier serum that created Captain America, but during this time, S.H.I.E.L.D. trained Bobby to be a spy, with a cool nickname as well, like Agent 19. I mean, she was killing it with gymnastics, so they made a pretty good call there. She became the hero Mockingbird in the 80s with Marvel Team Up issue 95. And in 2011, she finally became a super soldier in the New Avengers issue 13. When she was on the verge of dying, she was injected with this other version of the serum, and it saved her. And at the same time, it of course gave her super soldier abilities, which are always fun. Number 8, Sentry. Making his first appearance in Sentry issue 1, Robert Reynolds was a struggling addict who made his way into a laboratory and discovered something called the Golden Serum. And this was of course another version of the super soldier serum, but it was of course a little different. He consumed it and then he got the surprise of a lifetime when he was then given the power of 1,000,000 exploding suns. That plus a homemade costume equals, well, superhero. Let's do it. Robert fought alongside the X-Men, the Fantastic Four, and then of course the New Avengers. Things changed for Robert when Norman Osborn decided to put together a team of his own. That team was the Dark Avengers. I feel like we're getting close to seeing the Dark Avengers in the MCU. Either that or the Thunderbolts, one of the two. Hopefully Thunderbolts. It feels like Thunderbolts. Number 7, Red Skull. He made his first debut back in Captain America Comics issue 7. Johann Schmidt, aka the Red Skull, has been a pretty powerful villain in the MCU as well. After all, he's now the protector of the Soul Stone, which is cool, but it's a little boring. Definitely looks a little boring up there. But his origins are the opposite of boring. Now, of course, being the main enemy to Captain America, Red Skull has too dabbled in the serum department. Now, most of the time, he was just a great villain. He didn't necessarily need a serum to do his job. He was an evil mastermind. He was doing great. Now, it wasn't until Dr. Zola transferred his subconscious to a clone of Captain America, and now he was an evil genius who just so happened to be super strong as well, which is just what we need. So in Captain America issue 350, after months of manipulation from the resurrected Red Skull, Steve Rogers confronts and defeats his replacement, John Walker, another super soldier who I'll mention later on in this list. He also had to battle the Red Skull, but at this point it's a little tough because the Red Skull is now a clone Steve Rogers. I mean, it's exciting, but it's also a little confusing when you're looking at it on the page. So not only does he look like Steve Rogers, but he's just as strong. With the help of his Dust of Death, his red mask shrunk, and now that was his permanent face. So it was a little easy to tell who was who after that point. Yeah, lovely. Number 6, Omega Red. Arkady Rossovich, aka Omega Red, first appeared in comics with X-Men Volume 2, Issue 4. He was born a Russian mutant, and he was pretty intense right off the bat. His family was afraid of him even without the powers really kicking in just yet. He grew up and joined the Russian army, but he also dabbled in the life of crime on the side. That's how most of these guys do it. Now, the Red Army caught on to all these horrible crimes. They started figuring out that he was behind them, and they tried to execute him, but his mutant powers didn't allow that from happening. Dazzler once described him as an Omega level mutant. He's not to be played around with. So they figured, hey, this guy might be perfect to test a new Russian super soldier serum. He already had this ability called the Death Factor, and basically the Death Factor is where Omega Red can emit lethal death spores from his body, and he has to get rid of them too, or else he'll just harm himself. So he was already this crazy mutant, and then he got the serum on top of that, and now he's got super strength, super speed, and he was also given metal tentacles in his arms too. Number 5, Bucky Barnes. Near the end of World War II, Bucky and Cap were trying to disarm a bomb on a plane while taking down Baron Zemo. Now the bomb went off, hurling Steve and Bucky into the water, but Cap, he was fine. He came out of this pretty easy. I'll explain what happened to him later on in this list, although you probably already know. He remained frozen. He just hung out and chilled. Literally. But Bucky wasn't so lucky. His body fell into the freezing waters, and at the time, a Soviet spy submarine was in the area crossing the English Channel, so they scooped him up, fixed him up a fancy new arm, brainwashed him, and turned him into this brutal assassin. With the help of Hydra's new variant of the Super Soldier Serum, he now has all these incredible abilities that make him a fierce fighter. But he doesn't remember how he knows these things or how he can do these things. That's what makes Bucky so unique in the MCU and in the comics. This is Steve's right-hand man. This is heartbreaking. One of the biggest turning points of Marvel Comics was the introduction of the Winter Soldier. I love seeing him start to settle on the good guy's side. I mean, fixing up the boat with Sam, tossing the vibranium frisbee back and forth. It's great. They're just chatting about life. It's lovely. It's great to see how far Sebastian Stan's come in the MCU as well. Like, shout out to Sebastian Stan. He's killing him. Super underrated still. Number 4, Nomad. Jack Monroe entered the comics with Young Men issue 24, and during the time in history where Cap had been frozen, they used Jack to explain some of the time between those big stories. So in Captain America 155, the secret origin of Captain America, we get some answers. So we have William Burnside as well. He was a professor who was inspired by Captain America, and he came into contact with a super soldier serum, and he and Jack Monroe became the new Cap and Bucky. Jack was the Bucky and William was Cap. They both took the serum and they both got enhanced abilities. Now they did some good work as a team, but the only thing was a year later things started to go wrong with the super serum. Cap started to become a paranoid schizophrenic, so the government froze him. They put him in a cryogenic suspension, because that's what you do to super soldiers when you don't know what to do with them. He went from being Captain America to becoming the villain. I mean, it sounds all too familiar right now in the MCU. William and his Bucky Barnes sidekick Jack Monroe were both in custody of Dr. Faustus, and they brainwashed William to become the Grand Director, the leader of the hate group called the National Force, and Jack went on to become Nomad. Number 3, US Agent. John Walker is causing quite the stir in Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and in the comics, he of course was no different. After he paid a visit to the Power Broker, the Madman now has super abilities. Now the Power Broker is being teased throughout Falcon and Winter Soldier currently, but what do they do exactly? What's their deal? Well, they trade their knowledge of technology for high-paying customers who want to undergo this risk to get some sort of super ability. It's like a gamble. Half these people don't even survive. More than half of them don't survive. Issue 333 of Captain America was titled The Replacement. This is when the government is weighing their options on who should be the next to lead the nation. Now this is after Steve Rogers stepped away, so they go with the guy who just launched a dude off a building, this crazy US agent John Walker, who at the time was first introduced as Super Patriot, so he was always on board with the super life in one way or another. Number 2, Isaiah Bradley. Currently played by Carl Lumbly in the Marvel Cinematic Universe in Falcon and the Winter Soldier, Isaiah Bradley made his comic book debut in Truth, Red, White, and Black issue 1. This was after the US Army lost the secrets of their super soldier serum with Dr. Erskine. Now they still wanted to create more super soldiers, so they did this. Colonel Walker Price and Dr. Wilfred Nagel took 300 soldiers, including Isaiah Bradley, against their will and used them as test subjects for this new serum. It was awful. They had sent the soldiers' family members invalid letters stating that they were no longer alive. They were so shady and awful and mean to them. Now only a handful survived this process and they went on to be this covert Black Ops team. But after a few missions, Isaiah was the only survivor left. Now this is one of the most compelling elements of Falcon and the Winter Soldier, is the introduction of Isaiah Bradley. It's emotional, it's gripping, it's truthful, and in the most recent episode, Isaiah reflects on the times that he would cross paths with the Winter Soldier, and how his use with the serum was the only reason that he was surviving those encounters. And finally, number 1, you guessed it, Steve Rogers. Came into Marvel Comics, of course, with Captain America issue 1. Now he grew up during the Great Depression in New York City. He was a scrawny little man, but he had a big heart nonetheless. Now both of his parents had passed away while he was still young, and he tried to enlist in the army, but he was rejected because of his frailty. Now when General Chester Phillips overheard him talking about how much he wanted to serve, he deemed the boy was the chosen one for this top secret project called Operation Rebirth. This is where Dr. Abraham Erskine, and the creator of the serum, injected Steve, and voila, now we have Captain America. Steve was put through physical and tactical training afterwards. He even became a skilled gymnast in the meantime, because you know, flips are cool. His first mission as a super soldier was to suit up in the red, white, and blues and take down the Red Skull. Now the mantle of Captain America is finally being handed over to Sam Wilson, the Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and we're looking forward to seeing more Captain America stories come to life on the big screen, this time with Anthony Mackie holding the shield.
Number 10. Red Hulk. Thaddeus Ross was always a Hulk villain, but originally he was just an irate military general who believed the Hulk was too great a threat to be allowed to live. He became obsessed with capturing and often killing the Hulk. His obsession only grew more fervent over time, driving him to madness and eventually leading into his transformation from human Hulk nemesis known as General Ross into the villain known as Red Hulk. That's right, his hatred of the Hulk actually ended up leading him to later become like the Hulk, simply in order to get revenge. That is how twisted his mind had become over time, starting as a military general who was originally concerned with national safety, proving that rage can change you and leave you blind to the monster you may be transforming into. Number 9. King Shark. Originally, many believed that King Shark was simply a mutated human. However, it was rumored that King Shark may actually be linked to a being known by some as the Shark God, and this was later added to King Shark's origins and history, making him more than just a bizarre villain who happened to be part shark part man, as he now had mystical origins. His initial character design and appearance in the Superboy comic from the 90s has also changed radically in comparison to how he's often depicted as looking and dressing today, especially in the Harley Quinn animated series. Number 8. Norman Osborn. Norman Osborn has pretty much always been one of Spider-Man's greatest foes over the years, but while he's iconic and steadfast in many ways, he has also gone through a lot of changes just in regards to his own supervillain identities. He also briefly became a sort of bizarre anti-hero who was really still a villain in disguise when he fired the shot broadcast around the world, killing Skrull Queen Veranke, who was impersonating Jessica Drew's Spider-Woman. Killing the Queen of the Skrull Empire granted him hero status and put Norman in charge of his own hero agency, which he named Hammer, which replaced Fury's disbanded S.H.I.E.L.D. He then created and became the leader of his own superhero team composed of villains, known as the Dark Avengers. Number 7. Cheetah. We have just had so many cheetahs over the years and so many different origins for this character. Cheetah is a legacy Wonder Woman villain who went from being Priscilla Rich, a jealous debutante who was envious of Wonder Woman and as such became obsessed with opposing her as a hate-filled supervillain, to Barbara Minerva, an archaeologist who was actually once a good friend of Wonder Woman until she was captured and given superpowers by the plant god Kartaga, hopefully I'm saying that right, which allowed her to become part cheetah, part human creature. Barbara became an enemy of Wonder Woman not because she was jealous, but because she blamed Diana for not saving her. Yikes. Number 6. Galactus. Even with Galactus' origins, there was a lot of change going on with him from the beginning of his story. Just in his transition from alien humanoid and explorer Galen to the powerhouse that we know as Galactus. But while Galactus has been painted as a villain in the past, he also became understood as more of a neutral figure over time, with us even learning that although Galactus' insane power levels and hunger caused him to need to devour whole planets, he actually was a cosmic force that was needed when it came to maintaining balance in the cosmos. Basically, Galactus is a necessary evil. For a time though, he even moved from being more of a villain or neutral figure to actually being good, becoming the Life Bringer, a being who, instead of devouring planets and feeding on their energy, had the desire to recreate planets, including restoring the lost life and lost worlds that he had previously devoured. Of course, now he's back to being Galactus, so. Number 5. Killer Frost. Killer Frost is a mantle that has been both associated with villains and heroes in DC Comics. One of the more notable characters to use the moniker was Dr. Caitlin Snow, a researcher who found her body had become merged with ice following an accident with a coolant system during a time when she was frantically trying to escape former colleagues who were revealed to be villains who wanted her dead. This transformation caused her to become a heat vampire, draining heat from others in order to survive. She could also produce and control ice spikes and harm others with her intensely icy touch. Caitlin Snow has been a hero on a few occasions, but she has also been a villain on a few occasions as well, often changing back and forth and flip-flopping between the two. Similar to Morbius, her main purpose is seeking a cure to her condition, and her alignment often depends on which hero or villain best suits this purpose. Number 4. Joker. So you might be surprised to see Joker on this list. After all, there are some characters here who have changed from the side of villain to hero, which to some might be considered a bigger change than anything we've seen from the consistently villainous character known as Joker. However, I would argue that just because his alignment has not changed much doesn't mean that his approach to crime hasn't changed a lot. The Joker originally was introduced 80 years ago as a very dark and sinister clown, murderous certainly, but not quite as violent, shocking, or horrific as he is now. There have also been various spins and takes on this character when it comes to the Joker's philosophy in regards to why crime and Batman are just so important to him. Over time, he's become much more obsessive, and his character has become more and more about pushing the limits when it comes to just how shocking and terrible his schemes can be. Just how much can the Joker push the envelope? How much can he shock or scare you? Originally, there was no real desire or need for the Joker to do this, by the way, in the comics. He kinda just did stuff because he wanted to. He used to be more about the action, and now he seems to be more about the reaction. It's all about a rise he can get out of you. I bet if you never reacted to the Joker, he would actually get super bored of being a villain to you. Number 3, Emma Frost. So many of the mutants, it feels like, are having their evolutions highlighted in the newest mutant line, Dawn of X, and this in no way excludes everyone's favorite telepathic villain turned hero, Emma Frost. Emma's changes really came from her passion as a teacher. Simply put, Emma was never an explicit villain in the comics. It was never really that simple for her. She's always been a more complex character, but for the sake of this list, we're going to consider her early on actions and feuds with the X-Men enough to refer to her as an X-Men villain, at least in the beginning. What we saw with Emma, however, was that even when she was in conflict with the X-Men team, she always seemed to admire and respect them somewhat. And it was this respect for Xavier's ability as a teacher that caused her to reconsider her own alignment, and her desire to be the best teacher possible for her students that inspired her to join Xavier and eventually the X-Men team, becoming more and more of a hero with each appearance as time went on, and as she also got closer to team leader Cyclops, aka Scott Summers. Number 2, Poison Ivy. Ivy herself has done a complete 180 since her initial introduction in the comics. She was originally a villain who used pheromones to seduce Batman, pining after him, and was painted as an eco-terrorist who put plant life before human life, often believing that humans needed to be exterminated. Since she was first introduced, Poison Ivy has actually moved closer towards becoming a hero, even starting to see that humans might not be as awful as she originally thought, and learning to tolerate and even form friendships with them through her bond with Harley Quinn. These two have actually proven to both be a huge part of contributing to the other's evolution, something that also often rings true in most people's everyday life. Many people learn and grow through the relationships that they form with others, giving us all a greater understanding of one another and the world around us. Number 1, Venom. Venom and Eddie Brock are probably the characters who have both undergone the most change together since their first introduction in the comics. It has honestly been a joy to read their growth and transition from supervillain to reluctant anti-hero to full-on anti-hero and even sometimes full-on hero. The symbiote we often refer to as Venom itself has had many partners over the years that it is bonded with, but it's safe to say that for better or for worse, Eddie Brock is the one who has inspired the most change in the symbiote, and the same could be said for the symbiote's influence on its main host, Brock himself. Number 10, Mr. Sinister. When we might not have originally been aware of the changes Mr. Sinister went through to begin with, we would later on learn more about the villain, and in so doing, learn about all the great changes that Nathaniel Essex originally went through to become Mr. Sinister. Sinister was created following Essex's turning to the dark side, becoming BFFs and partners with Apocalypse, and allowing Apocalypse to help Mr. Sinister evolve into the best, most freaky looking version of himself. Since we've come to know Sinister, he's also died at the hands of Rogue, and would later return as a bunch of different fail-safe clone versions of himself, including the iconic genetic virus implanted clone Miss Sinister, which would later allow him to be reborn as a mutant officially. Number 9, Apocalypse. Apocalypse is a villain who's kind of all about change, as that's kind of his mutant ability. And Sabinur discovered that evolution was his ability, and it is this power that kept him so strong and feared throughout time. That, and he also allowed himself to be altered by celestial technology. But not just his power levels and appearance have evolved over time. Apocalypse has also recently turned over a new leaf, joining his mutant brothers and sisters on the mutant nation and island known as Krakoa. There he begrudgingly works alongside his former enemies, even if he does often consider them to be still weaker than him. Still, he has fully embraced the ideals of Krakoa, even changing his name. He no longer goes by Apocalypse, but by, well, however you say this in Krakoan. In fact, he actually created his own name in Krakoan, as these symbols don't adhere to what we know of the Krakoan alphabet this far. I'm really hoping that someone at Marvel will start up a crash course in how to speak Krakoan, because I know how to read it, but how to speak it remains a mystery. and I still don't know exactly what Apocalypse's Krakoan name is. Though I assume it's something similar, but in Krakoan? Number 8. Kite Man. Kite Man was originally known as a B-list or even a C-list villain. Chuck Brown's Kite Man was actually a character inspired by Charlie Brown, who also had an affinity for kites. His original origins was simply that he was a kite-obsessed kid who grew up to become a kite-obsessed supervillain, belonging to Batman's gallery of rogues. However, when his character was reintroduced as part of the New 52, he was given a more tragic backstory of losing his son to a poisoned kite string, caught up in the war between Joker and the Riddler due to being the creator of Joker's Jokermobile and getting involved with Batman. It's a really hard time for Kite Man there. The death of his son caused him to become a villain and later somewhat of a hero, who is known as Kite Man. We've also gotten a relatively more humorous version of the villain, with more of a throwback to and play on his original C-lister status in the Harley Quinn animated series. However, the depiction of Kite Man in the Harley Quinn series has actually also led us to seeing a resurgence of his popularity, or has just allowed him to become popular, because I'm not sure if Kite Man ever had that before. Were people fans of Kite Man before the Harley Quinn animated series? Put up your hand if you were there before in the comments. Number 7. Riddler. Over the years, from a visual standpoint, the Riddler has changed quite a bit. He's also been varying levels of sane throughout the years as well. Though he's always been somewhat criminally insane, as that's a huge part of what makes him so obsessed with the world of riddles. He also always has a brilliant mind, and it's often his obsession with riddles and giving his enemies at least the ability to solve and then thwart him that often gets him caught. Riddler has gone from jet black hair to ginger hair and has even been spotted with a question mark mohawk before. He has been seen wearing his full spandex question mark suit originally, which became more and more of a question marked suit and tie look, to just a polished suit and tie look with hints of question marks, to back to that full spandex suit, to a trench coat, to Arkham Asylum prisoner garb. New Earth Edward Nygma also had a daughter who was only briefly around and known as Enigma, a sometimes pal of the Joker's daughter, Duella Dent. Look at where the Riddler started and finished, and you'll notice lots of visual and backstory changes to his character throughout the years. Number 6. Bane. While Bane in the comics might not have changed so very drastically over the years, the depiction of Bane's character in other media certainly has. Just compare comic book Bane to Nolan's Bane played by Tom Hardy, and then compare those two to the Harley Quinn animated series, and you've really got some different portrayals there. Bane in the animated series is sort of portrayed as being a not so bright but still quite strong softie. He is much less threatening than the other versions of Bane we have, and also much less of a genius. And he usually ends up as the butt of the other villains' jokes, and is often bullied by them. Something that would likely never happen to comic book Bane, or Tom Hardy Bane for that matter. If the Legion of Doom were the mean girls, he'd be their Karen. Number 5. Carnage. In terms of changes, Carnage has seen a massive level up when it comes to power since his origins. And heck, even when he first appeared on the scene, Cletus Cassidy and his symbiotic friend were still a force to be reckoned with, striking terror into the fear of many hearts. But since the story of Maximum Carnage, we've also seen the story of Absolute Carnage come in, and learned that if we had thought Carnage couldn't get any more scary, well, we were wrong. In Absolute Carnage, Cletus' corpse is resurrected and bonded to the Grendel symbiote to create a new version of Carnage, which would later snowball into an even more powerful form known as Dark Carnage. Number 4. Sentinels. As the years and alternate timelines have continued to progress and multiply, we have seen tons of evolution from one of the X-Men's most iconic enemies, the Sentinels, with new models coming out made to adapt with the challenges of the times and the foes they are facing. In X-Men Gold, we saw nanite technology used in the creation of Sentinels to make them even more deadly, allowing them to adapt as needed, altering their size and shape. In the X-Men film Days of Future Past, we saw the evolution of Sentinels using Mystique's DNA to allow these Sentinels to change shape, but not only that. The Sentinels of the alternate post-apocalyptic future we saw were also insanely durable and could transform their body into bioweapons. This was a reimagining of the Sentinel technology potential, where these robotic beings, created by Dr. Bolivar Trask, had now become the ultimate enemy to mutant kind. Number 3. Dr. Octopus. Dr. Octopus went through a fairly big change when he decided to abandon his dying, failing body and complete one last sinister plot to steal Peter Parker's body for himself. himself. He succeeded in swapping bodies with Peter, leaving Peter's consciousness stuck in his old failing body, while he took up residence inside Peter's younger and much stronger body. However, Peter Parker's mind would still manage to convince Otto Octavius to not just let the change be a physical one, but also a mental one, swaying him to take up the mantle of Spider-Man and even inspiring him to set out on a mission to be an even better hero than Peter Parker was in the role. He took up the mantle of Superior Spider-Man. Well, now he's kind of being returned to his more classic appearance via a reborn duplicate of consciousness. Otto's time as Superior Spider-Man gave us the most changed version of the character we've ever seen. Number 2. Loki. Loki has been on a roller coaster of change over the years. While the Marvel Cinematic Universe may have introduced us to a more classic Loki, evil adopted brother of Thor and Norse god of mischief, the reality is in the comics Loki has seen all kinds of crazy changes made to his form and character since he first appeared. After Loki and everyone died during Ragnarok, we saw him return in a female form, taking Sif's body for his own, and we had Lady Loki. Loki would later be returned to his male adult body after Sif reclaimed her own physical form. But then Loki would die again and instead be returned to us as Kid Loki, who was more heroic and far less villainous than his original counterpart. And now we have Loki Prime, who basically has returned to his original form but also holds within him all the altered forms that have come previous. He has the absorbed knowledge of the different versions we've known over the years and can transform into any of them at will, even forms he didn't necessarily choose for himself. Number 1. Harley Quinn. Harley Quinn has seen momentous change over the years to her character. She has become independent of the Joker while starting out as simply a small character who is meant to be his little sidekick and girlfriend. She moved from the Batman animated series to the comics to the big screen. Her outfit has changed multiple times and her attitude has also changed along with it. As she's become more self-aware, she's begun to question more why she does what she does, attempting to understand her motivations and even better, herself, moving slightly closer with every passing year from the category of ultimate supervillain towards the role of anti-hero. Just creeping up there.
Kicking the list off at number 10, we have Anti-Cap. Now, his true name remains a mystery, but this Cap made his first comic book appearance in Captain America and the Falcon, issue 1. Now, this man tragically lost his girlfriend in the Oklahoma City bombings, so he needed something to focus on. So now he enlisted in the US Navy, but similar to Steve Rogers, he was rejected because he was unfit for the job. Physically. Now, while this was happening, the Navy was trying to recreate their own serum, of course, but this time it was in the form of a patch, an AVX patch. Same deal though, this would enhance the subject's strength and endurance significantly. Now, it wasn't working, so the project's commanding officer, Admiral James Westbrook, straight up tried to shoot the guy because it was a lost cause. But in doing so, this near-death experience kick-started all these fantastic abilities. So the Navy then deployed this new super soldier on a mission to Afghanistan, then he went to Syria, and then he went to Iraq. So he was working with the Navy, he was doing a decent job. So after years of these missions, he of course got caught up in SHIELD business and tracked down Falcon back to America. Now these 14 issues are quite exciting, and at first, Cap actually thinks that this guy is his long-lost Bucky, the real Cap, Steve Rogers. And then when MODOK and AIM get into the picture, it gets absolutely wild. They stage Anti-Cap's death, then he helps them, then he goes against them. It's a ride, you gotta check it out. And before we continue on with this list, guys, if you wanna go ahead and give this video a thumbs up, that would be great. It's super helpful for our channel. You guys are the best. Thanks so much for watching. Let's hop right back into this list. Number 9, Flag Smashers. In Disney's Falcon and the Winter Soldier, the Flag Smashers are a rebel group, but in the comics, it's just one guy. Karl Morgenthau made his first comic book appearance in Captain America issue 312. Back in December 1985. He was the son of a wealthy Swiss banker who turned into a diplomat, and as a kid, Karl was never able to settle while he was moving around with his father. And over time, this naturally turned Karl into an introvert. So he was forced to grow stronger, mentally, spiritually, and physically. He had a lot of anger growing inside of him, so he turned that anger and energy into martial arts training at the age of 12. After his father lost his life in a riot outside of the Latvian embassy, he took all of his inheritance and put it towards this new future. He believed his father was too passive in the way he tried to obtain world peace. So he became a mace-wielding supervillain who rides on a flying cart. Because that's a good alternative. His name is Flag Smasher, so the first time we see him in action is when he heads over to the Acme Flag Company to do some property damage. But in Falcon and the Winter Soldier, we meet a version of this character, Karli Morgenthau, and she's part of a group called Flag Smashers. This group is 8 individuals who survived the blip, and with the help of some stolen super soldier serum, it made for a really entertaining 6 episodes. Karli was a great villain. She was young, hurt, and angry, and Sam Wilson almost got through to her a few times, before John Walker came in and Messed it all up. Number 7, Destroyer. Kevin Marlowe made his first comic book appearance in Mystic Comics issue 6. He was an American journalist who had gotten inside Germany to investigate the horrors within, and sadly he was captured by Germans. Whilst inside, he crossed paths with Professor Erich Schmidt, this German scientist. Now, he gave Kevin a version of the serum that would later be responsible for Steve Rogers. So now Kevin obtained these enhanced abilities. Step 2, of course, was to break out, avenge Schmidt, and go on a punchy rampage. Now, of course, with a new look and a name to go along, the Destroyer, quite fitting, I'd say. Years down the road as an old man, this super soldier didn't want to turn back the clock and have one last dance with Peggy Carter. No. Instead, he was dedicated to taking out all of his enemies. I get the whole Destroyer alias now. That checks out. That makes sense. Number 6, Warhawk. Mitchell Tanner first entered Marvel Comics with Marvel Premiere issue 23. Now, we meet Mitchell when he was critically injured in the Vietnam War, so good guy Dr. Burstein used a variation of the super soldier serum in attempts to save his life. Now, with most of these super soldiers, even in part 1, they all come out the same more or less. But Tanner's results with the serum made his skin turn into this granite-like substance. He of course has super strength, but his appearance was quite different. The stresses of seeing his home village in Vietnam being destroyed, plus the tragic end of his late wife Liu, he was mentally unstable, this poor guy. So now Warhawk, yes, we need a fancy new nickname of course, Warhawk became an assassin for the CIA and went on to fight Iron Fist. Then later he was sent to take out Atom Smasher, and then he was soon hired by the Hellfire Club to go toe-to-toe with the X-Men. Eventually this guy was handled. He traded in his skills and worked for S.H.I.E.L.D. in exchange for a reduced sentence. Not a bad deal. Number 5, Luke Cage. He made his first appearance in Hero for Hire issue 1. Mike Coulter did a fantastic job playing him in live action, and I really hope they don't recast him for future Marvel projects. Just bring him in. Kind of seems like he can already do the job. I don't know. So when he first entered comics, he was put in prison for a crime he did not commit. And he agreed to volunteer for this experimental treatment, of course, based off that original super soldier serum. Dr. Noah Burstein recruited Luke for his cell regeneration experiment, the same guy responsible for Warhawk, who I just mentioned. So the doctor immersed Cage in this electrical field, and when he left Luke unattended for a hot minute, in comes Rackham trying to take out Cage. Now, he overloaded the machine, but instead this just made Cage stronger. So now he has unbreakable skin and exceptional strength. Way to go, Rackham. Good work. Number 4, Black Widow. Natalia Romanova first entered comics in Tales of Suspense issue 52. She was an enemy of Iron Man's at first, and she was this KGB assassin. Her training in the Red Room made her a fierce warrior already, skilled in martial arts, plus the fact that she's a skilled acrobat. Yeah, we have a pretty badass spy. Now, part of her Black Widow program was her receiving a variant of the super soldier serum. Now, this gave her an improved immune system along with enhanced durability. Now, the serum is actually the reason Natalia barely ages in these stories, just like Scarlett Johansson. Maybe she got the serum as well. That would make sense. Her and Paul Rudd would definitely make sense. On top of these abilities, she comes equipped with a black bodysuit made of a Kevlar-like substance, and her wrists rock these 2 bracelets, and they fire off the Widow's Bite, which is a pleasant 30,000 bolts. Right to your neck. It's gotta feel good. So if these don't stop you dead in your tracks, those bracelets are also equipped with tear gas cartridges, and her belt contains these discs with firepower of 4 pounds of TNT. So you never want to cross paths with Black Widow, that's for sure. We're still eagerly awaiting her solo film because of delays with COVID, but I wonder if they're gonna throw in a variation of the serum in this origin story. I know it takes place a little bit in the past, of course, so I wonder if we'll see that. Number 3, Eli Bradley. Now, I mentioned in part 1 of this list a super soldier named Isaiah Bradley. He was a grounding, emotional addition to the MCU in Falcon and the Winter Soldier. And in the show, when Sam Wilson would chat with Isaiah, we caught glimpses of his grandson. The young actor Elijah Richardson recently dropped a hint on his future with Marvel after the finale aired. Check it out. So it looks like we may truly be on our way to the Young Avengers, which is super exciting. We have Wiccan, Speed, Hawkeye, it's all coming together, it's great. Now, his first comic book appearance was in Young Avengers 1. Now, he wanted to follow in the path of his grandfather, so he suited up as Patriot. Only thing was, he had lied. He didn't actually have abilities. He had no powers at all, until he received a blood transfusion from his grandfather, Isaiah. That, combined with his skills in parkour and combat, makes for a worthy Young Avenger, that's for sure. I really hope we see him in live action soon. He's amazing. He uses a replica of Cap's original shield, and his suit is a combination of Bucky and Isaiah Bradley's Cap uniform. It's great. Number 2, Taskmaster. Anthony Masters, the villain in Black Widow that we're so excited to see after this long delay, made his comic book debut back in Avengers issue 195. Anthony Masters is a former S.H.I.E.L.D. agent who turned into a mercenary and assassin. Now, his whole thing is he can replicate your physical skills. He has photographic reflexes. That's why in the trailer for Black Widow, we see him studying her fight moves on the screen. That's literally all it takes, and he's got it locked down. He became a teacher based out of the Taskmaster's Academy to train villains, henchmen, and he even trained US Agent how to use Cap's shield in the comics. Now, of course, after injecting himself with an experimental version of the Super Soldier Serum, all these abilities were just amplified. I can't wait to see this guy on the big screen. He's one of my favorite villains, and the combat that we're gonna get with this movie is gonna be so good. And finally, coming in at number 1, we have Todd Ziller. Okay, this one is pretty wild. Okay, so Todd appeared for the first time in Avengers Volume 6. He was a US corporal and was the test subject for Project Troubleshooter. Again, another attempt to recreate Erskine's serum. So sometimes these things work and sometimes you end up like this. Now, this serum was a hodgepodge of other transformative substances. So we combined gamma, mutant growth hormones, Pym particles, and the Connors formula. So yeah, we got more than we bargained for this time around. Todd turned into this giant reptile, hence the new alias, American Kaiju. And yes, he's as unstoppable as you would think. I mean, just look at him. Good luck. What, do you throw a shield at him? You gonna taser him in the neck? No way. This guy's a monster. Kicking off the list at number 10, Hawkeye. Now, this is Hawkeye from the Ultimates when he first appeared in Ultimates issue 7. This is when the Avengers confronted the new Ultimates and it ended up in this massive underground battle in New York. Now, Hawkeye got stuck under a car when Giant Man squished it. Now, he wasn't a super soldier at this point, so this probably didn't feel too good on the bones. The Avengers were then put on the USS Jimmy Carter. Now, this is when things start to get interesting. While they were there, Hawkeye and the others ingested Cash's serum, becoming super soldiers for a hot minute. Then they were able to rescue Nick Fury, but eventually they were captured by Gregory Stark and tossed overboard. So he was a super soldier for a brief amount of time. I feel like Jeremy Renner is a super soldier in real life. I don't know, I get that vibe. And before we continue on with this list, guys, if you want to go ahead and give this video a thumbs up, that would be awesome. It really does help our channel out quite a bit here. You're the best. Thank you so much for your support. Now let's get right back to this part 3. Number 9, Red Guardian. Okay, this next one we're still waiting to see on the big screen. David Harbour is playing Alexei Shostakov in Black Widow, and in the comics, he's currently Ronin as of 2010. But in Avengers issue 43, Alexei was first introduced to readers, of course, as Red Guardian. He was one of the best pilots in the Soviet Union, and he married the famous ballerina Natalia Romanova. Now, the KGB made new plans for Alexei when he was on his way to a flight mission. He was then told that he could no longer speak to anybody he knows, friends, families, and new love, Natalia. She was actually told that he died in an explosion during a test flight. Now, Natalia wanted to do something worthwhile with her life afterwards, so she became the Black Widow spy. And they kind of were hoping on this. The KGB wanted this to happen. So Alexei, of course, would go on to become the Red Guardian, the Soviet Union's version of Captain America, and over the course of his training, he became cold, ruthless, and cruel, much different than before. He appeared in Ultimate Nightmare issue 4 as a super soldier, but he was taken out the next issue. Number 8, Nuke. He made his first appearance in Daredevil 232. Meet Frank Simpson. He was a Black Ops agent in Vietnam War, and he's got an American flag for a face. He's pretty insane. He's ruthless. Every page, he's literally just screaming and attacking people. See, Wolverine actually tortured him and gave him a trigger phrase as well. That trigger phrase was no VC. That was his version of freight car logging in Homecoming. A little bit shorter. I feel like Zemo would have had a much easier time with this one. So when someone says no VC, Frank goes crazy when he's not supposed to go crazy. All thanks to Logan. Awesome. Yeah, Wolverine made Frank undergo the Weapon Plus program, even giving this super soldier some cybernetic parts as well. And hey, if sheer force doesn't get the job done, Frank can always rely on his trusty Betsy. Betsy is the huge submachine gun that he carries around. I'm kind of glad we didn't see this super soldier in the MCU. He seems like a bit much. Number 7, Iron Maiden. Now for this one, I'm not referring to Melinda Vostokov's Iron Maiden, but I'm talking about the USSR version of Iron Maiden, because it feels like we're on that track. This is a part 3 after all. You can find her in The Order, Volume 2, Issue 1. Now the Iron Maiden was part of the 1960 Soviet super soldier group that was placed into cryogenic sleep. Now she was there chilling, pun intended, until there was a nuclear attack on American soil. So after an explosion went off because of the Infernal Man on the West Coast, she then woke up along with the other super soldiers, but of course she didn't last too long as they were defeated by the Order. Just the costume alone, I had to include her. She's so sick. Number 6, Abomination. Emil Blonsky, aka Abomination, made his first appearance in Tales to Astonish issue 90. Now he was a communist Croatian Yugoslavian spy that infiltrated the US Air Force base in New Mexico, where Banner and General Ross work. Now in the MCU, we see him make quite a mess. Abomination is a pretty cool villain. We haven't seen him since, but I'm kind of hoping he comes back soon. See, Ross was hell-bent on recreating the super soldier serum that Erskine took to the grave, and this soldier was the test subject to that new variant. Whenever you hear the word variant and test subject, I'm like, I've heard the word variant too much in the news lately. I can't even do it. So the serum mixed with Banner's blood turned him into, well, an abomination. I'm still waiting for him to come back into the current MCU, but I think they're waiting for some Thunderbolts action to happen with General Ross. I feel like that's gonna be a big one for the She-Hulk show, for sure. Number 5, Nick Fury. Of course we have to mention Nick Fury, of course. He entered the Ultimates and Marvel Team Up issue 5, and Nick Fury would soon take over as director of S.H.I.E.L.D. And his first plan was to bring back the Super Soldier program, which actually resulted in the creation of the Ultimates. Fun fact. His origins are pretty wild as well. He fought for the US in World War II and was taken by force to be the next test subject for Project Rebirth. So when he was injected with his new serum, it gave him, of course, super strength, and then in turn he freed himself and other prisoners, and they just got out of there. So now he's got quite the power behind those punches. He's disease resistant and he's got enhanced senses. Just a super Nick Fury. I mean, that's pretty much Samuel L. Jackson. I feel like Samuel L. Jackson's a super soldier in real life. That would check out. He doesn't really age. Number 4, the Hulk. First appearing in Ultimate Marvel Team Up issue 2, Ultimate Hulk is wild. Dare I say, more intense than our other guy. So back in the day, Banner wanted to be just like Captain America. Back in his science days, he wanted to be big and strong. He actually told his mentor, Dr. Leonard Williams, this. And then since his student days at Cambridge University, he was committed to duplicating the super soldier serum in hopes that he can use it on himself. So when Nick Fury, the first super soldier that I mentioned, gathered the best genetic engineers to recreate the serum, Bruce was amongst them. Now Bruce actually thought that he figured out the serum at first. He just didn't tell the group because he didn't want them getting credit for his work. That happens quite often in group projects in high school, so it's fair. These people exist, they're still out there. He wanted proper credit, so he just went ahead and tested the super soldier serum out on himself and became Ultimate Hulk. Now down the road, and this is what makes Ultimate Hulk stand out, later on, Bruce decided to make more serum. So he mixed Super Soldier serum with the Hulk serum and then injected himself, and then he became this gray, monstrous Hulk. And his first plan of attack was to go after Freddie Prinze Jr. Nope, not kidding. Number 3, Masterman. Wilhelm Lohmer. This guy is, okay, let's talk about him. He was chosen for the German version of the Super Soldier serum. It's a little obvious looking at him what kind of super soldier he is. He made his first appearance in Giant Size Invaders, issue 1. Now he's pretty similar to Captain America in the sense of his abilities. He met Captain America for the first time in Wakanda when he and the Red Skull Invasion Force was trying to get their hands on vibranium for the Germans. Now luckily Black Panther took him down and stopped him, but he was still able to survive. It wasn't until Cable issue 51 until Masterman met his fate. Yeah, I don't think we need that guy running around in the MCU or in any comic book for that instance. Let's keep him out of there. Number 2, Warrior Woman. Julia Koenig made her first appearance in Invaders issue 16. She was a spy during World War II, and then she captured and hypnotized an American, William White, and he just happened to have secrets to the super soldier formula, and she got them out. Now, despite multiple warnings on not creating a do-it-yourself serum, she still went ahead and tried it out. So while this was happening, an explosion went off, and then Julia was also turned into a super soldier, just this big, loud event. Now, her first mission was to help the Red Skull and head to Wakanda, that same trip that I mentioned earlier. Now, she was actually set to marry Masterman. What a nightmare that would have been. Because she was really impressing everybody, and then he was impressing everybody, so they're like, hey, you guys should both just get together, because you're both insane. Now, part of the ceremony just had to include the assassination of the invaders, because, you know, that's what weddings do. Instead of putting on show, it's like, yeah, let's take some people out. But luckily, the final vows were never spoken as the reserve members of the invaders came in to save the day. That would have been the worst wedding ever. After the war, Julia was put into cryogenic suspension, and she wasn't recovered until after the German reunification. The long freeze actually gave Warrior Woman some brain damage as well, which complicated her recovery. And finally, number 1, Nico. Perhaps one of the most shocking scenes in Falcon and the Winter Soldier has to be when Nico bites the bullet. It's brutal. This happens at the end of episode 4, right when John Walker, US agent, goes crazy, and he ends his life in a public execution way. It's not good at all. It was a huge moment for fans while we were watching, and to make it worse, Nico was a super soldier and a member of the Flag Smashers. Now, the thing that makes Nico stand out and why we have to talk about him a little bit more, he was a huge Captain America fan growing up. One of the OG super soldiers, he looked up to him. And then after the blip, Nico joined Carly Morgenthau's cause and helped her steal some supplies. Now, he wasn't the worst super soldier ever by any means. I mean, clearly after seeing this list, you would agree. But I'm betting he never expected Cap's shield to be the weapon that ended his life.
Number 10, Spider-Man. We still have a few issues to wait for this, but it was announced at the end of 2020 that Peter Parker will also be getting a brand new look in 2021, designed by artist Dustin Weaver in tandem with the creative team on Amazing Spider-Man. As we won't be seeing this costume till issue 61, with it being featured on the covers of issue 62 and 63 of the current series, we don't know too much about it other than, well, what it looks like. The new look could be described as kind of futuristic and even a little bit reminiscent of Peter's dark white Future Foundation suit he had a while back. It'll be interesting to see if this costume is just as good at staying clean, or perhaps shifting into other looks or colors as that costume was. I hope it at least is good at staying clean. I feel like anytime you wear a bright white accented superhero suit in New York City, it's gonna be tricky unless you have Mr. Fantastic's unstable molecules. Black Mask. Black Mask hasn't changed as much as some of the others on this list, but he did receive a refresh to his look in Future State, and he got a bold new wardrobe in the Harley Quinn Birds of Prey film earlier last year. Gone are the days of pinstripe suits for Black Mask as 2021 comes around, and I gotta say, thank goodness. In Future State, we get a black, white, red, and gold palette for this new design, with a much more detailed and lavish mask featuring red glowing eyes and gold teeth. To me, this screams the horror that is Black Mask even more loudly than any of his previous looks. Whereas in BOP, Ewan McGregor delivered as Black Mask not just with a mesmerizing performance, but also with various loud and polished suits and looks, including a button-up shirt with a custom print design pattern featuring his own face. Seriously, the costuming for that movie was so good. Loved it so much. Alright friends, before we move on to this next point, if you want to help us out here at the channel, you can do so by giving this video a thumbs up. Seriously, it really does help, and thank you for anyone that's already done it. Number 8, Hulkling. Hulkling kept his color scheme, but also had some major changes to his role in the Marvelverse and his look in the past year. With Empire, we saw him take his rightful place as Emperor of the Alliance, uniting both the Kree and Skrull empires together. He also was forced to march on his own home, planet Earth, and had to consider the possibility that he might actually have to destroy it as he faced the alien plant race known as the Katati, who were there and were using Earth to bolster their strength and their power. He also got a sweet cape and more regal looking variant of his suit, and the awesome and epic star sword known as Excelsior. Oh, and while we weren't looking, he and Wiccan also got married. Thank goodness we got to go to the wedding after them. I was like, where's my invite? Why didn't I get invited to this wedding? Number 7, Harley Quinn. Harley has always been a pretty big fan of changing up her look, so it shouldn't be much of a surprise that she would make our list for new changes to design this year. Harley is likely going to be seeing not just external changes, but is also going to be seeing some internal ones as well that will carry on towards her new series in 2021. In Future State Harley Quinn, we are not only served up an awesome new look for Harley, but we are also going to be exploring Harley's allegiances and her alignment in depth, where she's coming more into her sense of independence and growing even more as she wrestles with just what kind of anti-hero or even full-on hero she wants to be. Aside from Future State, Harley also got a new look for the Suicide Squad, which seems to echo the look Margot Robbie will be sporting as Harley in the upcoming Suicide Squad movie. Number 6, Spider-Woman. There has been some controversy over Spider-Woman's new outfit, so I'd like to come in and clear the air a little bit. Also, I've said it before and I will say it again, if you are not reading this new Spider-Woman series, what are you doing with your life? You need to check your priorities because it is actually so good. It should be at the tippy top of everyone's reading list right now. And if it's not, I'm looking at you, I'm chastising you. Put it up there. Put it at least on your list. Spider-Woman sports a new suit in her newest series starting in issue number 1, but the suit is also amazingly integrated into the story. It's not only justified by Jessica Drew as to kind of why she needs it, but it also features into the ongoing storyline as well in a way that is very intriguing. No spoilers. For Jess though, I will share that she decides she needs a new look when everyone's favorite stay-at-home dad, Roger, suggests a return to security work, or as Jess refers to it as, more like mercenary work. After Jess laments a pileup of bills, Jessica then decides she needs a separate suit to signify that the work that she is doing is paid hero work to any onlookers and not as altruistic as her standard fare. Also, I love when she's like, I don't know, because like it's not very hero-y of me to accept payment, and Roger is like, you'll always be our hero. And I'm just like, oh, it's so cute. Her needing a new costume for this makes sense to me. And I personally think the new suit looks great, especially when she's on her bike. For some reason, it's just like really good bike suit. Number 5, Katana. In Future State, the next Batman issue number 1, we get a glimpse into some other going-ons in Gotham with some extra stories. One such group that we are introduced to is the Outsiders. Honestly, a group that I immediately wanted even more of after I finished their story. The Outsiders are a group of vigilantes who aim to help free the people from under the rule and thumb of the Magistrate, the future villain that everyone in Gotham seems to have to deal with in one way or another. Members of the team include Signal and a seemingly reluctant Katana, but one who has also received not only an updated badass look, but also an upgrade when it comes to her abilities. Honestly, I love this new look, and I love her new jetpack too, even if we only got it for that one issue. Number 4, Professor X. Or maybe just X, as I think he's going by now. Is it X? Though it's hard to keep track of these new names, honestly, especially considering Apocalypse has one, but no one seems to use it, calling him every other name that he's gone at length to say, don't call me that, at any given opportunity. Professor X is now younger and more agile than we've ever seen him before. Well, maybe not his most agile. He's not able to like dodge bullets or anything. During Dawn of X, we also see that Charles also now has a completely new look and design, with him wearing a form-fitting all-black suit and keeping Cerebro on at all times. Makes him also look very mysterious. Number 3, Wonder Woman. With the Wonder Woman films being some of the more successful DC films out there in terms of box office numbers and just overall viewership, as obviously not a lot of us are going to the theaters right now, it seems DC is putting Wonder Woman at the forefront of their latest refresh. We've seen Wonder Woman go through quite a few changes over the last year, from wielding a chainsaw with her lasso of truth operating as its ripcord, to her being elevated to god level by the end of the latest death metal event, when she took on the Batman Who Laughs herself. As Future State continues to develop, we'll not only see her character evolve into a new role in the DC universe, but we've also seen the massively successful introduction to new popular Brazilian Wonder Woman, Yara Flor. Everything seems to be coming up Wonder Woman right now in the best way possible. Number 2, Donald Blake. Donald Blake doesn't just have a whole new look, he also has a whole new agenda, as he returns not as Thor's ally, but as his enemy. He's hell-bent on a mission to take down not just Thor, but all of Asgard and the Asgardian gods besides. He sports a new, darker and crazed look, while also brandishing his signature wood stick, but also armed with a scalpel, which is terrifying. He looks like a wizard gone mad, which is fair considering, well, all of that Donald has been through up to this point. Everyone beware, because evil Donald Blake has arrived. He is looking for some payback. Number 1, Poison Ivy. Ivy has had quite a wild ride the last few years when it comes to changes in looks and even her alignment. In 2019, we got a brand new look from her after she was brought back to life by Wally West, resurrected from a flower she'd given Harley in Heroes in Crisis. After that, Ivy went through a lot more changes until we got a completely new outfit and redesign for her in 2020, where she dubbed herself Queen Ivy and threatened all of Gotham with vines, or perhaps more accurately roots, below its surface in Joker Warzone. We are still waiting to see how this plays out, but while I love that Ivy has taken the title of Queen, I'm hoping this plot ends up being more fearsome than the plant that is actually known as Queen Ivy, which looks like a houseplant that you might find your granny tending. Not to say grannies can't be fearsome. I mean, hey, look at Granny Goodness. But I love that she's supposed to be like Devil's Ivy, and then they were like, Queen Ivy.